Hickory Grove family, how you doing? Happy summer, good to see you. Those of you that are watching online, welcome whether you're watching at home or at the beach. We don't like you, I'm just kidding. We're glad you're here wherever you're watching from. And it means just a ton to us that you would be here in the midst of summer. We realize that the summertime is a time where we're all in like millions of directions, right? Like we're cramming in vacations, we're hitting Kings Island, the pool, and kids' ball games, and family reunions with those people you see like once every 2 years, and just trying to get it all in. And my wife and I were talking last night where we feel like already early on into the summer, we are just manically trying to cram in as much as we can into this summer. I think partly because we're trying to make up for everything we lost this time a year ago. Anybody else feel that way? Yeah, let's do it all. So much that a few weeks ago, we ended up in a bowling alley. Like, we never bowl. And I'm like, what are we doing here? And I'm like, we're bowling. Why? Because we can, right? And so just making up for lost time. But we went bowling. And as we got in the car, I made an observation about bowling. I realized there are two very different types of bowlers. First of all, there's the first group, which is the serious bowler. Maybe you've seen this person. They have the bowling shirt. Sometimes their name is on it in cursive. They have their own bowling bag, their own bowling ball with their initials on it. They even have their own bowling shoes. They stand over the hand dryer, keeping their hands, very dry and limber. They have the wrist guard. And then when they go to bowl, they don't just throw it down the lane. They have that kick out technique. It's like, right, where they kind of hold like the Fred Flintstone pose. Serious bowlers. How many of you here would say you're that kind of bowler? Like, be proud of it. Don't be ashamed. One of you. Fantastic. Why? Because the rest of them right now are somewhere bowling as we speak, right? Well, then there's the second group of bowlers that are the not so serious bowlers. Maybe this is you. You're only there because you were bored. It's the winter time. There's nothing else you can really do outside. You got invited to a birthday party, so you're kind of stuck there. But you walk in, you rent the nasty shoes. You don't give much thought to the ball. You try to find the lightest one that you can just throw overhanded down the lane like Hercules, of thunder. Your favorite thing really is going and getting the bowling alley concession stand nachos. Your wife chews you out because you're eating them while putting your fingers down those nasty bacteria-ridden holes. And are you using hand sanitizer? And maybe that's the kind of bowler you are. You use the bumpers when nobody's looking. How many would say that's me? I'm with you. Me too. You're at home here. But here's the deal. Regardless of what type of bowler you are, there's a common principle that kind of transfers over to all of us and applies. And that is when you're bowling at some point, whether you're the serious bowler, the not so serious bowler, at some point as you approach the lane, you got to let it go. You got to let it go. Because you think about how awkward it would look to walk around the bowling alley holding on to like a 14-pound ball. Hey, what's up, man? You got this thing here on your hand, carrying it into the restroom, standing at the concession stand with it. At some point, you got to let it go. And I think there's a big principle in this that carries over into so many areas of our life because we find ourselves all the time in what I would call these let it go scenarios or situations. I know in our home, we deal with the let it go situation when it comes to food. There's a big debate in our home between my wife and I over this question. How long can food and leftovers remain in the fridge and still be consumed and not make you violently ill? My wife and I do not see square on this. I believe that the fridge can leave food in there for weeks. I think food can sit in there for weeks, and that's why we have a microwave. Because the microwave kills all the bad stuff, right? My wife does not share the same belief or idea. And so tonight, this Sunday night, is garbage night. And about 8 o'clock, you'll see my wife in front of the fridge with a garbage bag just chunking stuff. And I'm like, whoa, stop. What are you doing? Why? And she'll be like, what is this? She did this a couple of weeks ago. What is this? Holds up this Tupperware, and I did like the sniff test. I said, I think that's your chili. She goes, when did I make this? I was like, it's like spring break. She's like, gotta go. It's got like hair growing on it. I'm like, no, it's your chili. I love your chili. Let it go. Let it go. Some of you deal with this when it comes to your favorite sports team. You have a friend who has a diehard team they love, and their team beats your team, and you can't let it go. And in that moment, you not only dislike their team, you dislike them, and you can't let it go. Whether it's sports or food or something else, we find ourselves every day in these let it go situations where if we're not careful, we carry this kind of bowling ball thing around that's heavy and it's gross and it's in the way. And we carry it into our relationships. We carry it into different situations and other areas of our lives. And we got to learn to let it go. And so my prayer all week for us has been that the Holy Spirit would allow us this morning to take some of these sinful patterns that we all wrestle with and let God transform it from garbage to fruit. And today we're going to ask God to help us do that with this thing called envy. Say it with me. Yes, envy. This 4-letter word that I think is one of the nastiest 4-letter words of all because it kind of sums up the curse of comparison. Every single one of us in this room and online, no matter how different we are, we've all had that experience where you start to feel a little bit envious of someone else. My question is, do you remember when that began for you? I remember the exact day it began for me. 6th grade, Connor Middle School. That Christmas, all I wanted was this green sweater, and I got it. And it was the first day back to school, and I got that sweater on coming back from Christmas break. I got the pink collar flipped up underneath it, totally rad 80s Miami Vice look going on. And I can picture it now. Here it is. It's got the alligator on there. Izod, right? And I can see the scene, man. I'm walking into school, and the girls are just flocking around me, standing in line to ask me to the snowball dance. It's going to happen. I walk into school, crickets. Nothing. And I'm like, what's the deal? And all the commotion is at the opposite end of the hallway, and all the girls are gathered around Brandon Berry, who also got a green sweater for Christmas. Only his had a picture of a guy riding a horse, holding a stick in the air. Polo. And right then and there, man, I knew what envy was all about. But it's the subtle thing. It kind of sneaks up on you. I love what Craig Groeschel says. He says, the quickest way to kill something special is to compare it to something else. And boy, is he right. I love my sweater until I saw a better one. And you know what that looks like, don't you? Maybe for you had a time where you decided we're going to remodel our kitchen. And you spend thousands of dollars on it, months of labor. You sacrifice eating every meal out in the garage with paper plates sitting around a card table. And finally, it's done. And it's wonderful. And it's glorious. Oh, it's the best. Until you go to your friend's house for dinner. You walk in, and you're like, was she college roommates with Joanna Gaines, right? Like shiplap on the walls, you know, double oven, island cooktop, a utensils rack, come on. And you're looking at your husband or your wife going, they don't even put their utensils in drawers. We're starting all over. I drive home in frustration. Quickest way to kill something special is to compare it to something else. And the challenge for you and the challenge for me is that we've never lived in another time like this where it is so easy to constantly compare ourselves and our situation to other people. I mean, really. Thanks to the gift of social media and Instagram and Facebook, we can 24/7 just scroll and scroll and scroll and continually compare ourselves to other people in their life. You ever been having a pretty good day until you take a break and you start scrolling on your phone, looking at Facebook, and you're like, oh, there's Tina having lunch. Is that Judy there on the table? Lisa? I don't remember getting that text or that invite. Right? And then you start a little steaming a little inside, and so you make a comment, oh, looks like fun, ladies, right? About 9 different emojis, you know, to convey your sarcastic frustration. Or maybe you're on Instagram one day and you go, wait a second, weren't they just at the beach like 2 months ago and now they're going on a cruise? Really? Good for them. I don't really care. I'm not jealous because we are going to rock our staycation. We got our zoo passes. Don't be jealous. Next Friday, we're going out to Big Bone for the Bison Tour. We're going to celebrate our prehistoric past. Haters, come on, right? I don't care. I'm not mad. Or the best is the person that posts the picture at poolside. You seen this picture where it's them and they're holding their book out and their feet are in the background? I don't know how you take that picture without pulling something. But you look at that picture and you're like, I hate that book. I hate that pool. I hate your feet, right? Like, this is how you feel. Everything was great until you saw what someone else was doing or what they had. And all of a sudden, that envy sludge starts to kind of creep in. It's nasty. If I could challenge you and me with anything else today, church, it would be this. Stop comparing your blooper reel to everyone else's highlight reel. Really. We don't see all the garbage and behind-the-scenes stuff. I don't get on Facebook and go, hey, just want to celebrate the day my wife and I had a huge fight. We're starting counseling tomorrow. TGIF, right? Nobody does that. Right? Hey, my kid's a hot mess. How about yours? All right. Nobody does that, right? No. But we see their highlight reel and we go, well, good for them. We're a mess. They've got it good and we don't. And so that sets us up for what I think is a really great working definition of envy for us this morning. Out of the gate. This is the definition we're going to work from. Envy is this. Envy is resenting God's goodness in someone else's life while ignoring his goodness in mine. That's what it is. And I think we think to ourselves, well, this is probably just a 21st century problem. They didn't probably deal with this back in biblical times. I'd wish I'd lived back then. I mean, life was more simple. They didn't have social media, all the comparison traps. Wrong. Wrong. If you begin to read the Bible and flip through page after page, you'll start to see story after story after story of envy gone wrong with tragic consequences. We're going to look at one today in the life of a guy named Joseph. A guy who, man, he experienced the poison of envy and it went south really, really fast. Now, if you're here online, you've never read the Bible, we're just glad you're here. And if you need a Bible with a translation you can understand, fine, we will get you one. But if you've never read the Bible yet, no sweat. There's only 3 characters you really need to be familiar with in this story. The first one's a guy named Jacob. He's old, and he's the dad. The second character is his son, Joseph. And the third group will be kind of a long list of brothers of Joseph's brothers. Let's pick up together in verse 3. It says, Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. Now, let's call a timeout right there. Right out of the gate here, we have a huge problem, don't we? This is like the breeding ground for envy. Okay? Not only does Jacob the dad love Joseph more than all of his other brothers and all of his other sons, he tells everybody. Couple words for Jacob, parenting class. One word for Jacob, idiot. You don't do that. Maybe you grew up in a family where you maybe assumed or were kind of suspicious of maybe who your parents' favorite was, but they didn't tell you guys. They didn't go, guys, bring it in. It's John, right? Good luck. Won't see you in the will. Take care. Right? They didn't do that. He didn't do that, but he does. This is envy setup. The brothers now have hard evidence. And the evidence begins to mount in the other part of verse 3. Look what happens next. It says, so one day Jacob, the dad, had a special gift made for Joseph, his favorite, a beautiful robe. Here we go. The favoritism now takes on a very concrete form in the shape of this beautiful robe. Now, if you've never read the Old Testament, here's what I want to let you know. The Old Testament we read today in English has been translated from the original Hebrew it was written in. If you ever really want to know what the scripture's saying, it's great to go back and really mine through the original Hebrew language. And most translations take this word robe to translate to mean long sleeves. However, the King James translation, which is probably the most famous translation of all, translates it to literally mean coat of many colors. We don't know much more about it other than it was one sweet coat. So much that Broadway made a play about it called The Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? It's a big deal. Now, when I first heard this Bible story, I remember thinking to myself, what's the big deal? It's a robe. Who gets excited about a robe? You might steal one from the hotel you're staying in, but who really gets excited about a robe? Calm down, everybody. I mean, when I picture a robe, I picture my dad growing up in his robe. It might have been the color blue. I couldn't really tell because it was disintegrating from the years of wear, holes in it, all the mystery stains where he had spilled stuff on it, Literally, I saw my dad one day, the belt on his robe broke, and I watched him walk out in our garage, get a bungee cord, and wear it for like another 15 years. Like, seriously. So I go, what's the big deal about the robe, man? What we know is Joseph's robe wasn't like my dad's. Man, it was like handmade, tailor-made, Gucci, Louis Vuitton kind of quality, and his brothers didn't get anything like it. They may have gotten like a knockoff members only jacket from the clearance bin at Ollie's or Big Lots, but they didn't get this. This robe screamed special. This robe said and proclaimed, you're valued. And it was an expression of the Father's love. And in that culture, it also was a symbol of great status. But it was in your face, raw favoritism. And every time Joseph wore this robe, don't you know that it just kind of turned the knife a little deeper into his brothers? And don't you know he probably wore it a lot? Probably like a freshman in high school when they first get their Letterman jacket, right? It could be 103 on a July afternoon. They're wearing that jacket at the pool. My jacket, yeah, right? I mean, that's Joseph. He's wearing that thing everywhere. And whenever he wears it, it just keeps saying to the brothers over and over again, you're not the favorite. You'll never be me. Hey, you'll always be second best, right? And so what I want to do this morning is I want to try to lay out some breadcrumbs that I hope you'll pick up. Some what I call some envy nuggets that I think will help us understand envy if you'll choose to pick them up. And one of them I don't want you to miss is this, and that is that envy often starts with mild jealousy and legitimate concern. Don't miss that. Sometimes, oftentimes, you and I both have very legitimate reasons to be jealous. We do. And don't you think the same was true for Joseph's brothers? Yeah. They had every reason to be jealous. It was very legitimate. But the question for us and the challenge is, when envy begins to kind of raise its ugly head, how do we get a hold of it and choke it and starve it out before it gets to that toxic, very unhealthy kind of place, like we see here beginning in verse 4. It says, but his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. Now, to me, this is a really interesting part of this passage because it says that the brothers hated Joseph. Now, we shouldn't hate anybody, but I'm like, really? I mean, who should Joseph have hated? Should hate his dad, right? I mean, Joseph didn't really do anything wrong. He received the robe and the gift. He didn't ask to be the favorite. But yet it says the brothers hated him instead of the dad. And they got so angry at their brother that they couldn't even say a kind word to him anymore. And that leads us to another envy nugget I want you to get this morning, and that is this. Envy always distracts you from the real issue. It does. You know what envy does? Envy always goes to blame when it should be looking on the inside. It causes you to blame the wrong person or the wrong thing. Like for these brothers, let's just get honest. It wasn't about the robe. It wasn't about the robe at all. It was all about them longing for their dad's love and approval. But see, that's what envy does. It clouds perspective. It blurs things. It turns potential friends into enemies like that. And when you think of your rival and you can't even say a kind word about them, envy's on the scene. Pick up in verse 5 with me. It says, one night Joseph had a dream. And when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Hey guys, listen to this dream. Here's how it goes. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain when suddenly my bundle stood up and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. His brothers responded, so you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? Come on. And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Now, time out for a second. Those of you that grew up in a family of brothers, can you picture the scene here with me? I mean, imagine this. Joseph's like, guys, bring it in, man. You're not going to believe this. I had the most amazing dream last night, and you were in it. Oh, it's so great. Here's how it goes. First of all, you get to serve me. Isn't that awesome? Like I'm in authority over you. You're obedient to me. It's going to be great. Why don't we just practice for fun with a little round of Joseph says? Ready? Joseph says, bow down. That's really good, man. Nice job. Joseph says, cool me off with a fan and carry me on a pallet and feed me grapes. Awesome. Joseph says, polish sandals, you guys are going to be so good at this. And they just hated him more and more and more. And so they began to plot and they began to scheme how they could not only take care of the robe, but take care of him. Look at verse 18. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. Now, here's a question I have for you. How do you think they recognized Joseph so far off in the distance? He was pretty far away. You think it might have been the robe? Could have been the robe, which I think reveals another envy nugget for us, and that is this, and that is when you're envious, you don't always need the total picture. When you're envious, you don't always need all the details, do you? Even a little whiff of something can stir up this toxic stuff. Evil begins to emerge. You don't always have to see the complete person or the complete situation. You can hear just the first syllable of their name and you're like, here we go, right? You're boiling. They wanted to kill their brother. Now, so you might be thinking, well, Chad, calm down, big fella. That was biblical times. This is 21st century now. We're educated, grounded, seasoned people living in the county of Kenton, right? We have everything we need. I'm never going to go out and actually kill somebody. And I would say back to you, fair enough. Let's say that you don't want to murder someone. Let's say your envy doesn't ever become that violent. But what about when you kill someone's reputation by talking so negatively about your rival? Or when you totally kill someone's career by setting up your rival to fail? What about totally killing a relationship because you go online emotionally and you fire these verbal heat-seeking missiles in the comment section? Sounds a little bit more like us, doesn't it? Envy's this weird thing that can go from 0 to 60 seconds like that. It can ride this elevator from bottom floor to destruction and revenge in seconds. Happened here. They wanted to kill their own brother. Verse 19 says, here comes the dreamer, they said. Which brings us to another envy nugget, and that is this, and that is when you envy someone, you often reduce them down to a term. We've all done it. In that moment, you depersonalize them. You dehumanize them. They're no longer a son or a daughter, a brother, a sister, or a friend. They just kind of get termed in a very cynical way by this possession they have that you don't have. We've all done it. Here comes Mr. Mercedes, Mr. Lake House guy. Mm-hmm. Oh, look, here comes Miss Liposuction, Miss Body by Yoga. Good for her. Oh, here comes Mr. and Mrs. My kid's valedictorian and got a full ride and's never made a mistake, right? We do it all the time. Pick up with me in verse 23. It says, so when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern, which was like a pit. And now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Then just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw the caravan of camels coming in the distance toward them. And it was a group of Ishmaelite traders. And then in verse 28, it says, so when the Ishmaelites who were Midianite traders came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt. It's like Dateline NBC right here. Thank goodness their envy fell short of killing him. But they definitely sought out to destroy him, didn't they? That's what envy does. Envy seeks to destroy. They wanted their rival gone. If they couldn't have the robe, no one was going to get the robe. And so they get rid of him. Pick up with me in verse 31. And as we do, we see them coming up with a scheme. They've huddled up. They've got their plot. They've got their plan. Here it goes. It says, so then the brothers killed a young goat, and they dipped Joseph's robe in its blood. They sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message. Dad, look at what we found. doesn't this robe belong to your son? It's like the worst acting ever, right? This is like soap opera acting right here. Like there was any question at all. It says their father recognized it immediately. Yes, he said, it is my son's robe. A wild animal must have eaten him. Joseph has clearly been torn to pieces. And then we get to verse 34. The dad sees the blood, the robe, the whole bit. It says, then Jacob, the dad, he tore his clothes and he dressed himself in burlap. He mourned deeply for his son for a long time. His family all tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. I will go to my grave mourning for my son, he would say, and then he would weep. And right here, we see the ultimate irony of this very tragic story. The brothers, they finally get their rival out of the way, and yet they still don't get what they wanted in the first place. It backfires on them. And what happens to Jacob? The dad now is pouring all of his energy, emotionally and physically, into weeping and to grieving the loss of his favorite son. See, envy always backfires. Nothing good or healthy ever comes out of it. These brothers, they lost a brother and gained nothing in the process. What they really wanted was to just walk into that room and see their dad's eyes light up over seeing them. But instead now, Joseph was gone, and Jacob's eyes were just filled with tears and sorrow, and they had gone completely dark. That's what envy does. It's destructive. It destroys. And so we come to this point today where we always come to what I would call the so what. We come to church. I think it's so easy to just check a box and then head to Frisch's and we'll see you next week. But we come to this place where we go, am I really going to do something with this? Like, what does this mean for me as I go get in my Honda and I drive back home and begin the week? Like, what am I going to do with this? And the $1,000,000 question is, so how do we let it go? Because, man, it's easier said than done. I think there's a couple things biblically we're challenged to do. The first thing is this, and that is instead of resenting God's goodness in others' lives, we're going to begin to celebrate it. Let's just be honest, that's hard. This is the thing we're not drawn to. We need God's help with this. Romans 12:15 teaches us this principle. It says, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Anybody ever watch UFC, Ultimate Fighting? You're like, I'm not raising my hand in church and confessing to that. You're okay. It's right. It's right. No, if you have, it's a little uncomfortable to watch because you have these two guys. To me, it's like rage in a cage. You have these two chiseled warriors that seem like they need anger management classes, and they come out and they just want to rip each other's heads off, and they fight, and it's bloody and it's harsh. But at the end of a good fight, if both those guys have integrity and character, you'll see the guy who lost come up and just embrace the guy and give him a hug and congratulate him on his win. And I just love that. He's able to celebrate the other guy who won. I love that these two guys can get in the ring and they can compete competitively and ferociously, and at the end still celebrate the other guy who wins. Can you do that? Can you? Can you say to that person, you know what? You got what I wanted, but I guess God had something else for me. I'm happy for you. Or you wanted that promotion at work. Somebody else got it, and you honestly think they were not the best candidate for it. You deserved it over them. Can you go to them and say, congratulations? Or here's a tough one. You've been praying for something desperately that you've wanted for a long time. God has not answered that prayer yet in your life, yet you see him answer it in someone else's life. Can you go up to them and say, man, I just celebrate what God's doing in your life. I'm happy for you. Instead of resenting their blessings, we begin to celebrate them. No comparisons. I don't know about you, but in my 49 years of life, anytime I go to compare, nothing good ever comes from it. Every time I begin to compare, one of two things happens. I either get really arrogant or I become incredibly discouraged. Every time. Nothing good comes from it. And I think God this morning, if he could, he would just be right in our face with a very loving megaphone saying, stay in your lane. Run your race. And celebrate God's goodness to others. It's biblical. Second biblical thing we see is this when we're trying to let it go. And that is this, and that is instead of ignoring God's goodness in our own lives, we're going to embrace it. Embrace it. Ecclesiastes 6:9 says, better what the eye sees than a roving of the appetite. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Wow. Better what God has put right before you. Better what God has given you than spending your life looking over the fence at someone else's greener grass, which we spend a lot of time doing. But it's tough, isn't it? Because our tendency is to always want to crave and look for more, right? We're just naturally drawn to the bigger, the better, the newer, to keep up with the Joneses. And the Bible says, stop. Would you stop? The Bible says, that's chasing wind, man. You're just chasing wind. Instead, to begin to celebrate God's goodness in my life. Instead of spending my life staring at greener lawns. And remember, that lawn you're looking at and staring at that looks so much greener, guess what? There's poop in their yard. It's not a real theological statement, but there's poop in their yard. You just can't see it from where you're standing. They too, over that fence, have got hard, dysfunctional, disappointing stuff in their life. You just can't see it from where you're standing. So church, don't worry about them. Go home today and water your own yard. Seriously. Here's why that's hard. If you're like me, I want the robe. Right? There's something so broken, I think, in all of us that just wants the robe. And if we're not careful, we will spend this whole life chasing after the robe. When my kids were little, they played with this ball of shapes. This should be like the ACT in the state of Kentucky. But I always got a kick as a dad watching them get frustrated with it, which probably isn't good parenting, but it was funny. And I remember watching them when they were really little, like taking a square and trying to cram it into a circle. And I just sit there and watch it go down. More and more frustrated because it wouldn't go in. They'd start smacking the thing and crying. They'd throw it across the room finally and walk out frustrated. And I laughed at that as a parent, but I look at that and I go, that's us. That is you and that is me. God has wired us up when he brought us into this world with this God-shaped hole in each of our hearts. A God-shaped hole. This God-shaped hole in our heart that only God himself can fill. And yet we almost spend a lifetime trying to cram it full of stuff and things that just aren't designed to fit. They're not designed to complete us. They're not designed to satisfy. The Bible says it's chasing wind. It's chasing wind. Would you pray with me? God, help us to realize this morning in this moment that we can stop seeking satisfaction and contentment in all these other places rather than you. Money and things, achievement, relationships. Sometimes getting way too much of our identity from our kids' success or performance. In a world that screams and chases more and bigger and better, in a culture that says we must keep up with the Joneses, God help us right now, today, to bring that exhausting, empty chase and pursuit to an end by realizing that you are enough. That in your economy, it's Jesus plus nothing. You're enough. Maybe we anchor our life to that truth today as we worship you.